Welcome to today's bite-sized learning on Terraform. Today we are going to be doing an overview of a Terraform resource, what a resource is, the components that make up a resource, and sort of how to leverage them. So I'm going to revisit a provider that we looked at in my overview to Terraform providers, the random provider, which is used for generating random bits of data. And we're going to look at one example of a resource and kind of use it as reference as we walk through the pieces of it. So a resource is something that Terraform tells Terraform that you want to manage a piece of data. It's usually something like an EC2 instance, or in this case, a password that we want to kind of have managed. So Terraform's going to create it. It's going to kind of keep a lifecycle history of it. And if something changes in the state, the backend state, it's going to remediate that the next time the Terraform plan and apply occurs. In the case of a random password, it's pretty straightforward what you want to do. You want to generate a password that will be used by other resources, downstream resources. In the case you can see here, you have resource, the name of the resource, and then what you want the ID of the resource to be in the state file. So this is a keyword. Resource is a keyword. Anytime you want to use a resource, you start your definition with this. You highlight the resource that you want to create, and then you give that resource a name that it can be identified as inside of the state file. A resource is made up of a list of attributes. Some are going to be required and some will be optional. These are the bits of input that you provide that get used to sort of output the desired result that you're looking for. In the example that's defined here, length is the only required attribute. It is a number, and the description of it is the length of the string desired. The minimum value for the length is 1, and the length must also be greater than or equal to the min upper plus the min lower plus the min numeric plus the min special. Using these bits of data, you provide the desired length. The optional attributes are things that you can use to modify it. So in the case of a password, right, this gives you hooks to define the complexity of the password. So you can define how many of the letters or numbers you need lowercase, how many you need to be numeric, how many you want to be special, how many you want to be uppercase. That combination provided will dictate the minimum length that you have to supply. By default, these are all set to 0, meaning that there is no restriction on the complexity of the password beyond meeting the length requirement. So if you had requirements like one special character, one upper, one numeric, one lower, the minimum length that you would be able to provide would be a length of 4, right? There are other things that you can provide in here, like overriding special, so you can supply your own list of special characters to use for string generation. This overrides the default character list and the special argument. So this is the special characters that are going to be allowed to be used inside. Uppercase means that it'll include the uppercase alphabet characters in the result. The default value is true. So there's always going to be default values for these optionals. That's what makes them optional, is that they always have a default. Sometimes this is not desired. So anytime you want to leverage a resource, you really need to look at that attribute list and you need to decide if those default values are acceptable for what you're trying to do. Because if you don't change it, they're going to have the default value behind the scenes. Read-only are things that are available on output. So in the example of the random password, there's a bcrypt hash, which is a bcrypt hash of the generated string. The ID, which is the static value used internally by Terraform, this should not be referenced in configuration, and then the result. You'll notice that there is a sensitive bit here, so this is a little bit special given that it's a password. Sensitive is a keyword. It implies that it will not be outputted directly into the console or terminal where the Terraform job, the Terraform plan and apply are running. It's going to be sort of censored out with some stars, and it'll prevent the password from being exposed publicly in any sort of way. Result is typically what you'll use. And up in our example here, you can see that the random password is created, and then the way that it is referenced is you pass that output, the result output from the resource, into some other attribute input. In this case, this is an AWS database instance. It has its own attribute for password, and we're choosing to pass in the result of our random password ID dot result. So this is going to take the input of this and feed it into the output of this. And that is how a resource works. There's not anything else to that. To recap, there is usually some form of input. There are both required and optional inputs. You need to review the full list of optional inputs to make sure that the default values make sense for you. And then there will be some form of read-only output that you can use to feed into other resources, or that you can output directly in the output logs of the Terraform to be leveraged by some scripting that or post-processing that happens after the fact. There's also this concept of importing. Importing is really good. We're not really going to cover it, but in this particular video, but every resource has a way that you can import it into managed state. So if I have a password that exists already, there's always a way to run a Terraform import command to sort of import that unmanaged password and make it a managed password. Every single resource will have an import capability like this. So if I have extending out to AWS, like if I have an unmanaged EC2 instance, an AWS instance is the resource type, there's always going to be an import that can be done to take that unmanaged EC2 and make it a managed EC2. It extends to every single resource type that's out there. So that's a little brief overview about resources in general. In the next video, we'll be talking about data sources, and that'll sort of sum up our little mini series about reviewing Terraform providers, Terraform resources, and Terraform data sources. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you give a like and a subscribe, and we'll be back next week talking about Terraform data sources. Thank you very much. Have a great day.